Welcome. I call to order the Town Council regular session. The time is 7:25, and the date is Thursday, April 10th. Pardon us for the delay, but there was an important meeting that needed to take place with school committee prior to this meeting, so we're a little bit delayed, but we're off and running. So if we could please all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. If we could have the roll call, please, Dale.
Council President Whaley.
Present.
Council Vice President McAtee.
Here.
Councilman Donnelly.
Here?
Councilwoman Healy.
Here.
Councilman O'Neill.
Here.
All members present.
Thank you. This is our second night. We had our first public hearing last night, and tonight I'm going to open the public hearing with school committee participation relative to Town Council's preliminary budget for the fiscal year 2014-15, as adopted on March 17, 2014, and this public hearing will address both the general fund and the school fund. And at this time, before I turn it over to Steve, I'm going to ask if there's any comments from Dr. Kristen Stringfellow and Dr. Maureen Carter.
I will just state for the record that we have members missing from the table this evening because of either personal matters or they're away on business.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us here this evening. I'm sorry I was absent yesterday, but I will say that my family enjoyed my son's confirmation, and I'm happy to be with you tonight and happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you. With that said, Mr. Alford, the floor is yours.
A couple of housekeeping issues. Last night there were really two questions that came on the municipal side as far as information that we advised that we would provide this evening. The first was, and I've given council sheet on what the cost of library operations would be for a Sunday period. Basically, you're looking at, on a 3-hour open base, it would be about $407 a day. We had at one time a November to March 3-hour. If that were reinstated, it would be about a $9,000 cost. If we had the library open on Sunday, 48 Sundays of the year, assuming that you discount the other 4 for holiday purposes, your cost would be around $19,600. I also looked at a 4-hour schedule, which would take the day rate up to about $550, and it would take the full year would be up over $26,000. So that's the detail that had been requested last night of what it would cost if those hours were reinstated. As I also mentioned last evening, the directives provided to all staff on the municipal side were that we were going with baseline programming. There were no expansions that were considered. So that was not a proposal that came through the library board prior to it being submitted to my office for consideration. It's not something that we are proposing at this time, but it's provided as information based on the information requested last evening. The second thing I wanted to provide a better perspective on is the question on unaccounted water and what the impact is associated with unaccounted for water. For those that weren't with us last night, what we were talking about is in a water system there's always going to be water that's lost, that's metered, and then lost before it gets to a customer. We average with the South Shore and Middlebridge system a loss of water between $18,000 a year up to a high of $38,000 over the past several years. What that means is that there's a loss in the area of between 13 and 18%. The state target for water systems is 10%. And I think the question that Meg was asking last night is, what does that impact an average household? What it means is that an average household would be paying between $4 and $8 more a year because of unaccounted for water. But remember, a portion of unaccounted for water is used by hydrants and for cleaning of the system in terms of when the hydrants are left open for extended periods of time to be able to clean out any of the buildup that would be within the pressurized pipes. So what we're looking at is probably in the area of, on the base bill of $178 on average in the last 3 years, about $5 of that was associated with loss of water. Obviously, it would be far higher for those with large volume water use and much lower for persons using the 5,000 cubic feet that's in the base allowance. But I think we need to keep that in perspective. I also looked back on our sheet in terms of leak correction. We've had over 135 corrections made since the year 2000 within the system itself. We are also, one of the concerns that I have, and I'm not sure how much I shared last night, is we're alleging water loss based on metered sales and metered consumption. The problem that we have with seasonal water systems is that the volume of water during the 3 months of the summer is probably a factor of 4 over what we would have in January, February, and March. Therefore, with a magnetic meter, with large volume flows going through, you're going to be able to record properly. With very low volumes going through, the margin of error may increase. So while we're looking at some wide ranges in terms of lost water, it may well be a metering issue, which with the $25,000 that's in capital budget for the current year, we're looking at replacements of meters to determine whether or not we can go with a smaller sized meter that would be more appropriate for the volumes when we have low flows during the winter months. So it's a problem that we're working on, but as far as the target, it is a wide range. The variances on a month-to-month basis are considerable. But on an average year base, I estimate between a 13 and an 18% yield. So that's the information I think that was requested. I'd be glad to address anything else on it. I think there was also a request to the school department for information that John was asked to address in terms of medical evaluations and cost distribution.
There you go. Steve, Maggie had a question.
No, I didn't have a question. I just appreciate the fact that you got back so quickly about that, and I thank you for doing that, because I did ask that question last night, because I know there are people concerned about the increase in the water rate, you know, but thank you.
Recognize, too, that that's just on the South Shore system and the Middlebridge systems. There's water loss that's going to occur from the point of the well that United uses to its customer base as well. Because every single meter pit that exists for each connection has the potential for leakage.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So there were two areas that, that we followed up on. One was in terms of the evals, line item 53213, which was special education evals. And I think certainly the general idea about this line item is there are times within a child's assessment and within their individualized educational program that there may be a need for a referral. That is unchanged over time. But for this item, you're seeing the Universal Chart of Accounts infuse child outreach screeners into this line item. So you're seeing an uptick of a combination of two line items, and that's why you're seeing an infusion. Our child outreach screeners would be evaluating youngsters prior to their preschool experience throughout town and prior to kindergarten, and doing early screening. The other question was regarding enrollment, And so my understanding is there was a question, regarding how do we get our enrollment data, where are kids going? And so John and I took the opportunity to scan through some of our NESDEC projections again. And our enrollment trend is running true to what NESDEC had projected. There's been a reduction in overall in Rhode Island, and certainly in suburban Rhode Island and in South Kingstown, in the projection of reduced birth data. Less children are being born, and less homes are turning over, and therefore less children are showing up in kindergarten and other grades. And so we are seeing and have been projecting and predicting and receiving a trend of a lower amount of youngsters throughout Rhode Island and in South Kingstown of approximately 40 to 60 youngsters each year. And that's consistent with what NESDEC had predicted that we would see. We're trying to counteract that, and so that's where you're seeing our push to encourage folks to settle here, and our new programs, and if they're going to make a schooling choice, to pick a public school choice. And so we're hopeful that the latest enrollment piece of 17, loss of 17 students was different than a loss of 37 to 67 students, which has been our trend over the last 4 to 5 years. So we're hopeful that it could be an anomaly, but we're hopeful that it's starting to bend the trend more in a positive direction. When folks have a choice, perhaps they are choosing to stay here.
Kristen, that evaluation line, does that include neuropsychological evaluations?
Yes.
Yeah. And do you have a ballpark figure, roughly,
I
of
think
how much?
Of how many?
Of a ballpark dollar figure of how much?
I'm sorry.
I think they're talking.
Is it about 38,000? This says medical evaluation.
Yeah, there's about 38,000 in the line, but the majority of that line is the screeners. I believe there's less than $4,000 in there for the medical
Neuropsych.
neuro evals.
Thank you. Okay, does anybody here at the table have any questions? Thank you for sharing.
Okay, now that
Back
we've
to
got the
Steve.
homework done, we can get started on on
We're
the
giving you extra homework tonight,
Okay, Dad.
and you're staying in for recess, too.
There is no recess anymore, there's not enough time.
I know, that's true,
On page 1 of the warrant provides a documentation of what the anticipated property tax impact will be associated with the budget that was adopted by the council. The preliminary budget adoption at $74,866,000 will require a property tax levy of $67,602,000. Net of the motor vehicle excise tax, we're looking at a property tax levy of $64,106,000 that will be necessary to come out of the flexible tax base. We're looking at, based on what's on the warrant, an estimated 4-cent increase in the tax rate. Based on additional updating of the roll, we're probably looking less than 4 and probably in the 3-cent range at this point. We're showing here $520,259 as new property tax dollars. I noted last night that to compare apples to apples, we would need to add $290,000 to that number. So the true number of what we're collecting in tax dollars, net of what we would be abating for elderly tax exemption, the true increase is $810,260, or a 1.21% increase over the current year tax levy. So I think that we need to point that out because, as I noted last night, we've changed the methodology that will be employed in dealing with elderly tax abatements. There will no longer be abatements, and when I say abatements, it means that we would actually levy the tax and then abate the taxes after they've been levied. Now what we're going to do is to have the elderly program on an exemption basis, which means that we won't levy the tax. So if we're not levying the tax, we can reduce that $290,000. That's why we're showing on the warrant the 521 rather than the 810. On page 2, we've got an explanation of the general fund. As noted last night, it's a restated budget for the 13-14 year because we're using a new chart of accounts. For all of our funds, all 8 funds, or 7 of the 8 funds, the 8th fund being the school fund, we are not changing chart of accounts. Chart of accounts that's been used by the schools is mandated by State Department of Education, so there was no change, so there's no restatement on that. The use of the new chart of accounts was to provide greater transparency and to provide a greater opportunity to define true costs of different municipal functions: public safety, public works, general administrative services. As you can see in the general fund, the transfer to the school fund is $49,614,000. It's $482,000 more than the current year. Our overall budget increase for the general fund is about $671,000, or less than 1%. If we jump down to the school fund, I think the major thing that needs to be looked at and recognized is that the expenditure statement for the schools is actually declining. We're expecting to spend less money on the education program in the 2014-15 year than we are in the current year. It's a $23,027 reduction. The revenue statement is the most concerning and will continue to be concerning when we see that state aid to education reductions are anticipated of $313,655. That will continue over the next several years, where we'll continue to see about a $300,000 or $320,000 reduction on an annual basis as we come into compliance with the state-adopted education aid formula. Also in the revenue statement, we're seeing reductions in use of fund balance by $135,000 and on receipts anticipated from Medicare of another $50,000. So overall, there's a need to increase the property tax by the $482,000, even though we're seeing a reduction in the expenditure program. If there's questions on either general or school fund, if not, I'll move on.
I also want to make that well known to the audience that if there's any questions on the school fund or any comments, now is the time to come forward. Did you want to say something, Tia?
I wanted to follow up with some statistics.
Okay. You know what? I'm going to take Jim's question at the town council table, and then we'll give you a chance to come and speak.
Kristen, last night, I think John had mentioned the group home aid. I think the consensus of the school committee was that it's still safe at the General Assembly, but it was also mentioned that we're maybe not even hitting 50% of what the true costs. Is there something at the General Assembly that can adjust that correctly? Is there any resolutions in place, anything that we see Department of Education looking at this differently?
Representative Tanzi brought forth a dialogue in December, school committee supported by way of a resolution, which I think some of the neighboring towns are actually taking a look at and maybe supporting themselves to at least say that we would like to be given consideration to get at least what we got last year. We thought about actually asking to be fully funded, but as you've said, that might be, that might be a little aggressive on our part. And those conversations have certainly happened at the school committee table. It varies year to year about how much it costs us, so it's kind of hard to pin down an exact figure, but it would be fair to at least provide what we have received the year previous.
The number of kids remain fairly steady over the last few years.
it's really such a variable number. It would be hard for me to say that to you because they come in and out so frequently throughout the course of the year even. And so I would say in the aggregate, the number of beds is a finite number, so that denominator stays the same. But within that denominator, the children come in and out, and the needs of the children are very, very different.
And we average about 17 kids.
17 kids for 20 beds.
Tia, if you would like to come and state your name with any follow-up information you said you had, please come to the microphone.
Okay, thank you. I'm Tia Beckman, and yesterday I brought up some concerns about language-based learning disability programming. And I had mentioned that I'd be able to come back with some scores today. And if I read the charts correctly, this is what I came up with comparing Narragansett and South Kingstown. Now, they have different populations, but there are some questions that I ask when I look at it. In South Kingstown, we received for the 2013-2014 reading scores for 11th grade a phenomenal 55% for those at a level 4, which is proficient with distinction. You know, it's real good. Narragansett received 76%. This is general population. At level 3, SK got 33%, Narragansett 21%. At level 2 and 1, which is below proficient, below the lower levels, it's not successful. Thank you. SK got 12%, and Narragansett got 4%. The IEPs. The kids with IEPs, SK got 12% at level 4 with distinction. Narragansett got 61%. Level 3, SK got, for the 11th graders, students with IEPs, SK got 23%, Narragansett 17%. Levels 2 and 1, I just mushed together again. SK was 75%, Narragansett was 22%. So, you know, my first thought is kids. You know, each year changes. The students change, the population changes. Is it that? And I went back a year or two, and I saw Narragansett doing well. I also remembered a conference, a meeting that I went with, Deborah Gist was speaking, and I had spoken to the superintendent at that time and of the Narragansett School. And she said what they had was Orton Gillingham reading programs. Teachers were, she also had been an advocate for reading programs, and she had a special ed director that she thought very highly of and recruited her to develop the programming, and she never wanted to lose her. And she did lose her recently to Deborah Gist. So I have spoken with therapists, and they would follow that special ed director anywhere she went because she was so supportive. From what I could see, when I spoke with parents, they were happy. Their kids that were similar to ones that I was talking about were on 504 plans. They weren't on IEPs. They had received therapy for reading, and they were using technology, and this is why I'm bringing it up, because of the technology coming into the school. They were using the technology for writing, you know, it's speech to text, you know, speaking into the computer and it's writing it out, using audiobooks, which can be free through Learning Ally. But the teachers are familiar with this. The rehab department is familiar with this. they're in the program is not unusual. So this is why I'm really asking you to take a look at your special ed budgets and develop language-based learning disability programmings so that all students will benefit in South Kingstown. I also have some articles. If other people want them, just let me know after, I'll stay. But I'll give, since this is a town hall meeting, I'll give them to the town hall. They're about language-based learning disability in the criminal justice and how those with dyslexia are very prone to becoming criminals, antisocial behavior, and to develop post-traumatic stress. It's a serious and very treatable learning disability. We've had presidents like John F. Kennedy with dyslexia. It's not a mystery. Programming has been around since 1935. Steven Spielberg, you know, many, Edison, many famous people, smart people, and we're losing a population if we subject them to post-traumatic stress and antisocial criminal behavior. Thank you.
We'll make some copies later. We'll make sure that the school committee gets a copy. All right, all of you. Okay.
Column 2, page 2, is explanations on the Peacedale Office Building, Neighborhood Guild, and the Senior Services Program. We're looking at a $342 increase in the Peacedale Office Building with more revenue coming in than expenditures that are necessary. All monies stay with the fund and are used for improvements to the building. Neighborhood Guild, we're looking at an $816,000 program cost. We are seeing a slight increase of about $9,000 in the cost associated with, I'm sorry, about $4,000 that's coming in terms of endowment fund increases that we're asking from the trustees of the school fund. Senior Services Program, there is tax dollars that go into this program, unlike Neighborhood Guild or Peacedale Office Building. We're expecting $378,178 from South Kingstown. As mentioned, this program provides service sharing with the town of North Kingstown and Narragansett. Narragansett's contribution to our programs for both the adult day care services program and for nutrition and participation in the senior center is $114,856. And North Kingstown's participation in adult day service core sharing, they will pay $31,614. The 4 programs have not changed: our transportation program, nutrition, or really the lunch program, our adult day services program that operates on Post Road, and our senior center that operates off of Broad Rock Road. If there's no questions, I'll continue. The next 3 are our enterprise funds on the water, sewer, and solid waste. Each of those are supported through revenues generated from rate base in each of the water and sewer program and through bag tags in the solid waste program. As I noted last night, we are seeing major cost increases of about 8% in the water fund. Most of that is directly associated with either capital improvement requirements and, more notably, a projected 30% increase in water rates for wholesale water that we purchase through United Water. United Water is currently before the Public Utilities Commission for a 43% rate increase. We have budgeted for them obtaining a 30%. Our best information at this point is that PUC will probably come in at 31%. So the dollar amounts that we're going to need are about an 8% increase. We'll also be required in the next year to change the rate structure, and we'll have to go to quarterly billing. That'll be subject to a future public hearing that the council will conduct. The budget that is before you this evening and approved as a preliminary budget is based on a rate structure proposed by a consultant that prepared that work for us over the past few months. That'll be reviewed in-house, and a final recommendation will go to the council before June. Wastewater, we're seeing no increase in rate structure for the year. We'll continue to have a fee of about $229 per unit with uses up to 10,000 cubic feet a year. The solid waste fund, there is no increase in the bag tag. It'll stay at $1.80, and yard bags will stay at the $1.25. So rate increases that we're expecting would be in the water fund or the property tax increase that we're looking at the 3 to 4 cent range. That is reflective of the 8 budgets that are within the 2014-15 budget year. As noted on page 3, column 2, lower display, we're looking at an overall program cost for the year of $90,369,000. That's an increase of $469,000, or about 0.5% more than what the 8 funds were required to expend during the, or what was appropriated in the current fiscal year. If there's no questions, I would simply note that the resolutions that are provided on the final page of the document really provide instructions as to the transfer of dollars from the capital improvement program in the general fund to the various capital reserve funds where the programs are actually expended. Same thing with the school fund under item number 2. That money has to go into the school improvement fund as a means of receiving 30% reimbursement from the state on that $25,000 expenditure. Items 3, 4, and 5 are revenue transfers into the general fund from either the open space reserve fund to pay down debt service on open space acquisitions, or from fair share development fees to pay down debt service associated with school bonds or recreation improvement bonds that were used for the acquisition and development of the Green Hill Park. Item 6 provides for transfers into the general fund for administrative expense costing for Peacedale offices, seniors, and Neighborhood Guild, as well as the transfer from the South Road Reserve Fund to pay down debt service associated with the roof improvements that were bonded several years ago for South Road. EMS billing is to reimburse the general fund for EMS service costs. That budget is probably in the $1.5 million range, of which that $575 comes in from insurance and Medicare reimbursements for services rendered. The 7th resolution deals with the actual transfers out to the school department, to the seniors program, and wastewater fund for services that for property tax transfers to those three funds. The 8th is the authorization for the trustees of the school funds to release the funds from the trust funds for the Neighborhood Guild. And number 9 is a transfer from the general fund into the compensated absences fund for anticipated retirements in the police department. Each of those resolutions are directly related to the budgets, both the expenditure statements and the revenue statements within the 8 funds contained on page 2 and 3 of the document. Be glad to answer any questions council has.
Thank you, Steve. Questions here at the table? Jim?
Yes, Steve, I should have asked a little while ago, the adult Services Program. You know, I see the transfer to senior services up there. Has the state reversed their trend, or is it continuing downward, their reimbursement for each of the clients there?
We're not seeing any increase at all, or anticipating any state increase in terms of the seniors program or the reimbursement level on the adult day program. As we noted when we put the budget through the public work sessions, it's around $100 a day that the costs are, and the reimbursement rates are well below that. So that's why the property taxes from each of the three communities is necessary to balance that program out.
What's well below in your terminology?
I don't recall the actual numbers, Jim. I think that with the state numbers, it could be as high as $55 with the federal money. I believe
With
that's the
federal,
extent
yeah,
of it.
with the federal money.
Right.
Yeesh. Okay. All right, thank you. Thank you.
Meg?
I actually, on the same note as Jim, page 2, bottom section, I'm looking at the senior services funds and the revenue statements that come in. And Narragansett, North Kingstown, we have the state aid. I would like to find out how many people from the Charlestown area or the Westerly area or people who are not in our community utilize these services. And if those towns we've discussed this in the past, will or would contribute to some type of funding? Am I off
We're
base?
having real trouble hearing you over there.
Oh, I apologize. I'm so sorry.
If you're asking whether or not, we've sent letters to participants from Charleston and other communities that have got people going through the Adult Day Services program and asked them to contribute fair share for their residents. That has been sent out each year for the last probably 5 years with Adult Day Services. Westerly has a nonprofit organization that runs, or has run in the past, adult day programming. There is a program in North Kingstown as well, it's nonprofit that's operated in that community. So there are a number of those type of facilities that are operating, but ours is the only municipal operation. Because we're receiving state aid with it, we have to remain open to a general population of the state. We can't exclude population from outside of our geographic boundaries.
And this is where my learning curve is because, I'm new here, but I saw the distribution from South Kingstown, Narragansett, North Kingstown. I just didn't know if any other towns had people utilizing the program and if they were willing to make a contribution to.
We do have the other towns that are making use of the program. In fact, in the program narrative that is in the budget document.
Yep, I'll look
We
that up.
document how many participants we have in terms of client days that are using the service.
You don't have to go into all that trouble.
We take a look at a 4-year period, and over a 4-year period, we've got 14,358 days of actual services over that 4-year period. Of those 14,358 client days, 3,114 are from outside of our community or Narragansett or North Kingstown. The fair share that we ask for from those communities is based on what the unit cost would be. That's why when you look at North Kingstown's contribution for the 14-15 year, it's down to, I think it's down to about $31,000, down from, I think it was 37 the year before. And the reason it's down is because their participation level has reduced. Narragansett's, we've seen an increase. The reason we use a 4-year period is so that we won't have sharp ups and downs, and it smooths it out, but we're still seeing, as less participation from North Kingstown comes in, their contributions will be less. But the real issue is that when you've got, approximately, almost 22%, 23% of the service area not contributing to the program, it's got to come from somewhere, so it comes from South Kingstown. We have, we've attempted to get that. We send letters to them. We document how many client hours we're providing on their resident behalfs. And unfortunately, we don't even get a response.
Oh, that's a shame. Because truthfully, if they're utilizing the services, maybe that's something that we need to look into. And
Some of it's in education. I don't know whether people recognize the importance of the respite, that care that's available and what it means to the overall family rather than just the client themselves. And I think that it's a very important program that
huge,
we
hugely.
did. But it's also a program that if the state would do a better job, would understand that we're keeping people out of nursing homes. So, but,
Thank you. Thank you for taking the time to respond. I appreciate that.
I have a question that's just going back a little bit, and back to Tia's comments. And we had that committee that served a couple of years ago, and it was, in reference to kids with language-based learning disabilities. And, that's a topic that is near and dear to my heart as well. The numbers that Tia referenced will be probably included in the report card that the school committee looks at. You have a school committee report card that
We
will
have a
probably,
school committee balanced report card, but it doesn't include Narragansett's numbers.
it's the cohorts of the 6 states. Is he still doing that? So not
We
Narragansett?
do look at cohorts, right?
Right. And that information will be compared to the 6 other cohorts?
Right. We change our cohorts at some points, but it doesn't get broken out precisely in the way that Mrs. Beckman relayed it. But yes, certainly we compare our data to other cohorts.
And, since that committee formed, Kristen, is there any kind of a development of a plan that addresses, at an early age, a screening tool to identify some children, that possibly have dyslexia? And I think the bills up at the General Assembly in reference to dyslexia, I think that it's looking for training for teachers to recognize that, at a very early age, so.
Actually, when Mrs. Beckman was speaking, I was reminded of those meetings. I think it brought to our attention, it was particularly the technology needs, and sometimes the fact that either outside providers or parents had brought technology on the scene sooner, in some cases, individualized than school departments did. I can't speak to another school department. I don't know what happens in other school departments, but I can say that it began our conversation about BYOD in our school department, and that continued. And so I know that there certainly is greater conversations and more conversations between our curriculum departments and our technology departments than ever before. And I credit our cooperative efforts in that group. Now I think they met today, our technology planning committee, the curriculum and professional development group work together. So that's a nice piece. Based on your discussing the resolutions at Tuesday night's school committee meeting, one of the feedback items is from our special education director taking a look at some of the items that you reference with regard to those bills. There's a lot of information and a lot of good information that I'm not ready to share tonight, as I didn't know you were going to ask me that
appreciate
question.
it.
But
Yeah.
stay tuned, and so I'm sure that we'll be able to give them some things to consider, and hopefully bring us even further forward in our support.
Appreciate all of that work, thank you.
Can I just,
Carol?
Kristen, who are the cohorts? You said Narragansett is one of them.
Typically, we've had Charahoe, Narragansett, Charahoe, North Kingstown. We have had Lincoln, Portsmouth, and we've recently, not officially, but been comparing ourselves to Barrington and East Greenwich.
But not Narragansett? Is that what you
No,
said?
Narragansett, Charahoe, North Kingstown, Lincoln, Portsmouth, and recently been also bringing on, although we don't have the same demographics as East Greenwich and Barrington, but we like to keep them on the periphery.
That's great. Steve?
Yeah, I just wanted to answer Jim's question a little bit more directly. The state reimbursement rate's $41.48. The Medicare, if they're eligible for the Medicare payments, is $52.98. That's what the reimbursement levels would be. If they're, the clients themselves pay as little as $7, based on if they're Medicare-based, and $11.50 if they're state-based. So there's a large variance. But having said that, you've got to look at the fact that the client-based family was paid over $85,000 toward the cost of the program, and between state and federal, we picked up another 112. So you've got, you know, over $200,000 that is coming in reimbursement before the municipals get involved with it. So it's still a program, while expensive, I think is still something that if we can get the numbers up, because right now we're down to about an average 14 to 15 clients per day. If we can get that number up to a level of around 18, then it will become a little bit more efficient.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments from here? Town Council? School Committee? Any questions for us? The public? Seeing none? Again, I just want to thank School Committee and the Town Council for a great working relationship. And I appreciate, you know, Dr. Kristen Stringfellow and John Rashat and Steve Alford and Trish Sunderland and all of the school committee, school department staff, the town staff. You know, we are fruitful here in South Kingstown, and we truly have a gem, as was stated yesterday, in our town. So with that said, we appreciate, you know, the collaborative working relationship, and can we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion and a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstention, motion carries, and we are 8:10.